Crazy Bernie Sanders versus Sleepy Joe Biden as the two finalists to run against maybe the best economy in the history of our country and many other great things. I look forward to facing whoever it may be. May God rest their soul. A new national poll from Emerson College shows Bernie Sanders is the frontrunner in the Democratic primary race, followed by Joe Biden and Mayor Pete. Joining us right now is the GOP strategist, John Thomas, to weigh in on all of this. And, John, the Democratic field keeps getting bigger. Do you agree that those are the front runners? As President Trump said, Biden and obviously you've got Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, actually, I think President Trump's take is the right one here. And this is what President Trump does so brilliantly. We saw it in the primary in 2016, Maria, as well as the general election, is he defines and brands his opponents before they can define themselves in an election cycle. Going right now, looking at Bernie Sanders, because he had such an impressive fundraising haul of over $18 million in this first quarter, that makes him a viable contender. And I don't see his money shutting off. Yeah. So what Trump just did with those two nicknames, Maria, was underscore these candidates' two fundamental flaws. One is that Bernie Sanders is a crazy socialist who will be bad for everyday Americans. And the other was Sleepy Joe, which really, although it sounds cute, it's important to note that what he's doing is he's branding Biden as out of touch with a modern America and a modern economy.
Richard Fowler is here. Richard, what do you think about all of this? And let's talk policy, because I still am waiting to see the policies coming out of, for example, Joe Biden, what he thinks he's going to run on. Bernie Sanders has got his Medicare for all, but many people poke holes in that policy, given the fact that it wipes out the private insurance industry.
Well, I think that's a good point on the Bernie Sanders ideal of, wiping out insurance policies. I think for Joe Biden, he's not in the race yet, so it's hard to evaluate his candidacy until he actually announces. And I think that this race will come down to, Maria, I think you pointed to the right issue, it will come down to health care, right? I think a lot of Americans are really trying to figure out what they're going to do around health care with the president's announcement that, that his Justice Department will go after health care. And I think with pre-existing conditions sort of being on the table for many Americans, especially in places like Michigan and Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, where this race will come down to, that's what this race is going to be about. And with the White House not proposing a health care plan and saying they're going to wait till after the election, so I guess you have to vote for the president to find out what's in it. We'll see what happens.
Well, I think we know Bernie's policies. Bernie is a socialist, except when it comes to practice, he's a capitalist, right? And I watched his interview on Fox News or the town hall, and he says that he won't apologize for making, $560,000 on the book and, $1 million in prior years. But my view on it is, if he's a socialist, why doesn't he have that money go to some entity, or why doesn't he have it dispersed amongst, 1,000 people? So I think he does need to actually defend that he's a capitalist in practice, but then speaks about socialism as his theoretical worldview.
I didn't understand that. I'm capitalist in practice and a socialist in terms of my views. How can you be that, Dagan?
I don't understand. I don't understand. I think that their arguments for socialism fall apart if you create a system that basically inhibits wealth creation and entrepreneurship in this country. Where are you going to get the tax money from? That's what my one big issue. But I did want to point out that Bret Baier pushed Bernie Sanders on that very question during the town hall, which was the highest rated town hall on any news network so far. So we're going to watch. I'm hoping that Howard Kurtz was reporting that even like Mayor Pete Buttigieg might come do a town hall, and other people who are running for the Democratic nomination.
Yeah, it was really good, and it was spicy. I mean, it was, they had you on edge the whole time.
Well, I said this to Stuart Varney yesterday, that Bernie Sanders clearly was hammering Trump immediately. And I said, be careful. Do you really see yourself as the victor in the Democratic primary and then winning the Democratic nomination? Because he immediately started hammering President.
Socialism thing. I'm so worried about this turning away of capitalism. Ultimately, whatever the least socialist Democratic candidate is the one that I want to run, because capitalism is such a fundamental part of this country. It's such a fundamental part of democracy. They go hand in hand. And the fact that we have these candidates coming out saying that we should be, early Russia is just insanity.
And it's muddying the waters. What do you want to push back on?
I want to push back on that a little bit. I think the idea, and I think, yes, so you have Bernie who's talking about he's a socialist. I think if you look at the rest of the field, there's a conversation about how we ensure that people have access to health care. There's a conversation about how we make sure that everybody has access to a good, high-quality public education. Those things in themselves aren't socialist.
Well, they all endorse the Medicare for All.
Right, Medicare for All, and there's different forms and facets to it, but basically what is at its root is making sure that every American has access to some form of health care, no matter what the cost looks like.
But
socialism...
You can't have a route with a way to do it, and the way that they're proposing doing it is a big, gigantic federal program, which is a socialist program.
But let's be very clear. I mean, the Republicans have no solution to health care right now. And, I mean, the ideal of socialism is the idea where the government owns the means of production, and no Democrat is proposing that the government owns the means of all production, number one. And I think, number two, more importantly, to have a conversation about Bernie's earnings without talking about the big elephant in the room that we haven't seen the president's earnings whatsoever is a little bit problematic.
But it is the means of production in the health insurance industry.
Yeah, go ahead. John Thomas, I want to get your take on all of this, but I also just want to say, let's not underestimate all the money that Bernie has raised. This fundraising has been incredible. He's in the lead in terms of money raised, $18 million so far. The New York Times reporting some in the Democratic Party are, quote, agonizing over his momentum and his ability to raise money. Having said that, the Trump administration just reported what they earned in the first quarter, and it was $30 million. So there's a lot of money on the Republican side.
Yeah, and Trump raised even more for the RNC than just that $30 million in his campaign. So, Trump is slaying it in terms of a war chest, but the money that Bernie has makes him a viable candidate, especially in these early states. He can afford the most field organizers, the most TV ads. Look, Maria, if he wins Iowa, which right now he's polling within the margin of error in the top two, and if he can hold that, he will go like a rocket ship to New Hampshire, where they love him. He will win New Hampshire, and then he might be unstoppable. But I want to go back to the point about, you're talking about the elephant in the room and Trump's tax returns. Here's why Bernie Sanders being a millionaire is such a problem for Bernie Sanders, because it undermines his fundamental brand promise, and that is that he hates millionaires and billionaires, that millionaires and billionaires are evil capitalists and they don't belong in our society. But Bernie's a guy who has multiple homes, and it turns out that he's just another rich, fat capitalist.
I don't
so
think
it
that's what he's saying,
undermines
though.
the purity
I think what he's
of
saying
his
is that everybody
brand.
should pay their fair share.
Who's not paying their fair share?
We've talked about this on
Let's talk. Wait, no, just tell me who is not paying. This is such a talking point that bothers me.
No,
because
Maria,
the top 10% pay 71% of the taxes.
We've had this conversation before.
Yeah, I know, because it's a talking point.
And no, we almost agree on this point. I'm talking about folks who don't pay their fair share in capital.
Like who?
We're talking about folks who, like the capital, people who only make their income off capital gains, who are not paying enough taxes as a secretary would.
All right.
Right?
Like
and
real estate investors.
Real estate investors, hedge fund managers, where a secretary is paying 35% of her money in taxes.
Well,
where
wait a second. Now you're putting apples together with oranges, because
no, we're talking about money going into the general
about
fund.
Income,
right?
And Warren Buffett is talking about capital gains.
They're
don't
all
mix the
incomes
two of
coming
them.
in, right? They're all money that could be spent.
It's not. One is capital gains, one is income.
But isn't that money that can't? Isn't that
capital gains is an essential part of this country and entrepreneurship.
I agree with you, but you're saying that those...
Don't mix
the idea
it
that
up.
you own stock and you build a business, I mean, you can argue maybe it should be 18 months or 2 years, but if we don't have capital gains, there's no
I'm
point
not saying we shouldn't have capital gains. I'm just saying that we should level the playing field.
It is level. That's another talking point, and you're confusing it. Warren Buffett, when he talks about he has to pay less in taxes than his secretary, it's two different things. The secretary has ordinary income. Warren Buffett doesn't have an income. He's getting taxed on his stock, which is capital gains. So
I agree.
But you just said the same point, so I have to stop you and correct you.
No, I'm not. What I'm saying is that Warren Buffett's capital gain should be taxed at the same rate as his secretary's income.
Well, the Democrats are going one over on everybody.
That's all I'm
because
saying.
Senator Ron Wyden has proposed taxing unrealized capital gains, which is wealth confiscation. So let's try and win the presidency on that one, because Elizabeth Warren is doing the same thing with her wealth tax.
I mean, we could even...
She wants to, in a social, not even a social,
but Dagan,
in a communist way, she wants to confiscate.
We could start there.
The reason that they have capital gains taxes lower than ordinary income taxes is a way to encourage people to invest for the long term, whether
I
it
agree
is
with you.
invest in a home, buy a home, invest in the stock market, buy stocks. No, but you just said
Maria,
you
I
want the
agree with you.
income tax rate the same as the capital
agree
gains
with
tax.
you,
But then
but what you see in the
you just made the
marketplace-
statement, so it forces me to stop and explain it.
No, I agree. What we have is this, right? Is that you have corporations who have billions of dollars in profits that's not going back into the marketplace, that's sitting on their books. They're not investing. They're not hiring people. The money's just sitting there. Whereas if that money was given to middle-class families, if that money was given to working-class families, that would go right back into the economy right away.
That was the point of the tax cut plan.
But
where they
the
cut
middle-class
corporate
tax
rate.
wasn't permanent.
You know why? Because not one Democrat would step up and vote for it. That's
It was
why.
because the Republicans couldn't find to pay for.
Nope.
John Thomas, thank you. We'll be right back.
Thank you.